So we are into day one of NFL free agency. Today, I guess, is the start of the legal tampering period. These deals will not become official until Wednesday, but they're pretty much official. But it's still also Mock Draft Monday. I've got a crazy one here for you today because there are going to be some weird picks. Players you're maybe not used to seeing get to certain spots, players you're not used to seeing certain teams take. That's not always going to be the case in every situation, but I've got to monitor what happened in free agency, at least on day one, and how will that affect each team in the draft. Things, of course, are not going to be set in stone. There's a lot that will change. The Raiders are picking now at 14, which is different from my last mock draft. The Chiefs have acquired the 29th overall pick for Trent McDuffie, and there was more involved, but this will look very, very different than every other mock draft I've done pretty much, especially down the board. A lot of changes. Some things will stay the same because teams didn't address their needs, because it looks like they're probably planning on doing that through the draft. We're going to kick things off with Fernando Mendoza. The more some things change, the more they stay the same. This is one that is staying the same. I've been getting asked recently a little bit about the possibility of the Raiders moving down, and I think that would be cool to move down and maybe pick up, let's say, from the Jets, number 2, number 16, maybe number 33. You know, it could be a lot of moving parts for the Jets to move up. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think the Raiders are going to stick and pick and go with Fernando Mendoza, QB1, one of the best players in the draft, and they've really done a lot in free agency to build around him so far. They bring in Tyler Linderbaum, the most expensive interior offensive line contract of all time. That being said, it's only a 3-year deal, right? So a little bit of flexibility there. They bring in Jalen Naylor, who's an athletic, I would say, I don't want to say underused wide receiver, but he hasn't really had a ton of opportunities. And when he has, behind, Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, he's produced. So he signs a really big contract to go to the Raiders, who spent a lot of money. Of course, there's a cap floor in the NFL. The Raiders are trying to meet that. That's why they gave out a huge contract to Kwity Paye. And they bring in the Georgia boys, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker on big deals. It's an interesting new look Raiders team. I'll have a video talking about every move that happened in free agency ultimately, so be sure to stay tuned and subscribe for that. But Mendoza's the pick at number 1, and I still think Arvell Reese is a strong contender to be the second player off the board to the Jets. Really highly athletic linebacker that is going to end up being an edge rusher. The Jets also look very different. They've done a lot for their defense in general, but especially with that defensive line. Of course, we know about Harrison Phillips, but they bring in David Onyemata. We know about Juwan Briggs, one of the more underrated young defensive linemen in the NFL. And that wasn't all. The Jets, traded for T'Vondre Sweat. They've really been very active, and it's a very interesting looking team, and I am intrigued by the Jets. Of course, they're going to be bad still probably, but I am intrigued by them. I think Reese is going to be a good player, a good pickup off the edge, and they might be cooking a little bit. Joseph Osai is a Jet now. They bring in, on only a 1-year deal worth $10 million, they bring in Kingsley Enagbare, but I don't think that stops you from drafting Arvell Reese at number 2 overall. And then we get to a weird team, the Cardinals. They've been active in free agency as well. A lot of these bad teams also happen to have a lot of money. The Cardinals bring in Gardner Minshew, and I'm not going to do this for every team because, one, I can't remember every single thing that happened in the moment, but also there are a lot of moves to talk about, so I don't want to spend too much time. Isaac Seumalo is now a Cardinal, so they at least shore up their left guard spot, but the offensive line's still not great. I look at their pass rush, and I think it can be improved, but they're at number 3 overall. They're trying to build the framework for a successful offense post Gardner Minshew now, as they're likely to be their starting quarterback, I guess. And I think that Francis Mauigoa is a solid selection. I think Sonny Styles is in play. They bring in Tyler Algier, which I think probably stops Jeremiah Love from being a potential Cardinal. And 3 was, fairly high anyway, even though he's a top 3 player in the draft. It's just the running back position. But Mauigoa is a really, really solid player. He's probably the best true tackle in the draft on day 1, or certainly is. I think Fano has some concerns with the arm length now that may end up pushing him inside. And I really like Francis Mauigoa. I think he's a solid, powerful tackle. The movement skills are not actually elite, but he's a really, really solid player. And in this class, I think that's a solid grab here at number 3, a plug-and-play starting right tackle, and the offensive line starting to get revamped. You have Paris Johnson on one side. Again, we talked about Sayamalo being a new addition at left guard, but that right side still needs some work. Jonah Williams is a free agent. Mauigoa is a plug-and-play starter, and I think that's a solid option at number 3. Could I see an edge rusher? Could I see Sonny Styles even? I think these are possibilities. I think Mauigoa, to me, seems to make the most sense right now. And then at number 4, I really am intrigued by what the Titans have done in free agency. They've spent a lot of money, and this was a tough pick for me to make. And as you can tell from the thumbnail, I originally had Jeremiah Love here, and I'm sure that's going to end up being a pretty popular selection for me, but I'm actually not going to do that today. The thumbnail is smoke and mirrors. I can't give everything away. So for the Titans at number 4 overall, I'm going to go David Bailey. I know they trade for Jermaine Johnson. The edge rush still isn't amazing. Just Jermaine Johnson is not going to move me a tremendous amount. You know, I look at the players they have lost. Arden Key now is going to be an Indianapolis Colt. I think they need more youth and they need more talent. And David Bailey apparently is very highly regarded by the NFL. I've got some concerns with him overall as a player. I still don't question that he's going to ultimately end up being a top 10 or top 12 pick. He's really one of the better speed rushers you're going to find. Just not a complete player at this point. But if the Titans are looking for immediate pass rush help, David Bailey is certainly going to be helpful in that regard. So we'll go David Bailey to the Titans at number 4. I think Jeremiah Love's in play. I think could they consider Sonny Styles or Ruben Bain here? I think absolutely. And Carnell Tate. I mean, I know they bring in Wan'Dale Robinson, and they've spent a lot of money in free agency. Big money to cornerbacks. Of course, Giant Cordell Flott. Alante Taylor returns to Tennessee, former Volunteer. Cornerback probably not in play, but Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, could be in play at number 4. But we're going to go David Bailey today as we get to the Giants at 5. Another team that's been fairly active in free agency. They bring in Tremaine Edmonds. They managed to re-sign Jermaine Illuminor on a really team-friendly deal. The Giants also bring in Ardarius Washington. What else did they do? They still need to upgrade receiver, and that's why Carnell Tate makes a ton of sense here. They still need to upgrade guard, and that's why they've been heavily linked to Elijah Vera Tucker. Maybe Wyatt Teller's an option. Maybe something happens while I'm recording this video that changes things, but I'm going to end up going with Sonny Styles again. I don't think committing all that money to Tremaine Edmonds on a 3-year deal, but with the guaranteed money, it basically works out as a 2-year deal. I don't think that stops you from taking Sonny Styles at 5 because Micah McFadden's a free agent. You cut Bobby Okereke. I don't know that Tremaine Edmonds and Darius Mussau is the best linebacking duo you can possibly find. I think Jeremiah Love is actually an interesting option for the Giants here. Not saying I would campaign for that. I'd like to see what a healthy Cam Scatterbo can do in 2026 and then make a decision from there. I like Tyrone Tracy. Maybe the Giants bring in Keaton Mitchell, who they've been linked to, former Raven, of course. Isaiah Likely, obviously a Giant now. Didn't mention that in kind of the intro to this team. But I like the idea of pairing Styles with Tremaine Edmonds. You have 2 gigantic linebackers. Styles is a very good athlete. But the Giants seem like they want to upgrade at running back. So if this ends up being Jeremiah Love, if he's on the board at 5, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world. I don't know if it'd be the best pick for the team, but I think it is actually an option. But we're going to go Sonny Styles today. I think Caleb Downs is in play. I think Mansour Delane is in play with losing Flott. Cornerback needs to be upgraded. And then, of course, Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon even. The Giants, I think, could still heavily consider receiver. And they've been linked to Brian Thomas Jr. I don't know how real that is. But they may opt to just go power and run the football and then find a receiver in another way. We'll see if that comes via trade or with a pick down the board a little bit. It's a pretty talented receiver class. They don't necessarily have to take one at 5 or at the top of the second round, although it remains, I think, a strong option. Guard needs to be addressed. I'm thinking at the top of round 2 is likely when that happens. Bringing Illuminor doesn't necessarily eliminate Francis Mauigoa or Spencer Fano or, Monroe Freeling if you want to kick him over, which I would be surprised by. But I think it probably means that the Giants are not going to take a right tackle, but it's still a possibility. Illuminor is like a 2-year deal. Browns at number 6. I'm going to go Monroe Freeling. And it seems surprising that he would go before Jeremiah Love. But, you look at what the Browns have done in free agency so far, and they bring in Zion Johnson. They trade for Titus Howard. The offensive line still needs a ton of work, and they've done really nothing at left tackle. I still feel like Taylor Decker would be a really good option. And I think if you bring in Taylor Decker, former Ohio State guy, right, he can start for you for a year, maybe 2, and then Monroe Freeling is not forced to play right away. I like that. I would still, if you bring in Taylor Decker or even maybe Rasheed Walker, depending on the contract, I still would consider Monroe Freeling at 6, even if I think Carnell Tate might be a more probable option. But Freeling is probably the only true left tackle in this class worth taking before Caleb Lomu, who I think could end up sneaking into the first round. I'm going to tell you it didn't end up happening in this mock draft, but Freeling is, with his size and athleticism, a really intriguing prospect. And I think the Browns, who really need offensive line help, could strongly consider that at 6 with no real option at 24. Unless maybe like Lomu there, but I think it seems like a little bit of a reach maybe, but Freeling's really athletic and has some really good potential. Commanders at 7. Gonna go with Jeremiah Love. I haven't seen this a ton, but it seems like a strong contender for the Commanders if he were to be available, because you don't really have a lot there. I get Bill, Ja'Cory Crosby, Merritt, but Austin Eckler's not very good. You have, not really a lot of great options. I'm trying to remember who else do they have in that room. Jeremy McNichols. It's not great. Jeremiah Love is a home run hitting running back with good vision and patience for that speed. He really is just a big play waiting to happen. And I think if you look at what they've done in free agency, it doesn't necessarily need to be an edge here at 7, although Ruben Bain is an intriguing option. I think Jeremiah Love is just the best player they can draft here, so they might as well, right? At number 8, we're going to go with Ruben Bain. The Saints have done a lot in free agency as well. They lose Demario Davis to the Jets. Didn't really talk about that with the Jets pick, but that is a thing that happened. They bring in Travis Etienne. They bring in a big upgrade at left guard. I think it's an interesting spot that the Saints find themselves in. Noah Fant, also a tight end. But, and we'll see what happens with Cesar Ruiz at right guard. He might end up being replaced in the draft. We'll see if that happens or not. But I would say that, and you lose, obviously, Alontae Taylor as well. They don't need to take corner here at 8, although maybe it's a possibility. It's receiver and edge that are here. So to me, this pick came down to Ruben Bain or Mekhi Lemon. I ended up going with Ruben Bain, powerful edge rusher, very good against the run. I just think that this is probably the best move the Saints can make, given who's available. Tate, strong consideration, but ended up going with Bain. As we get to the Chiefs at number 9, who's playing corner for this team? I like Noel Williams. Christian Fulton's there, but they could add Mansour Delane as well. They were able to retain Travis Kelce, shock of the year, I know, but they lose so much. They lose multiple starting 3 corners. Their top 3 corners, I feel like. Maybe Noel Williams was ahead of Josh Williams, but maybe not. I think you can make a strong argument for Delane here at number 9. He's a really solid player, had a great season at LSU, and the other alternative here is still pretty good. Like Caleb Downs, Carnell Tate, maybe even Kenyon Sadiq. The Chiefs find themselves with a pretty good board, to be honest. Like, they could easily take the first receiver off the board. In the end, I went for the first corner, It's a strong receiver class. I think I like the idea of taking the first corner off the board and delaying more than I like Carnell Tate here, only because of what the board will look like at 29. I think I prefer the receiving options to the cornerback options at that point. Although I like the cornerback class. I think Chris Johnson's a really good player. I think D'Angelo Pons is awesome. Cisse is a great athlete. Colton Hood had a really, really good season. I know the Senior Bowl was up and down. I love Avion Terrell, not that he will get there. I like Keith Abney a lot. I think Keontae Scott's going to be a great nickel. I really like Traden Stukes. Chandler Rivers, I think, is a great player. I like Dalen Everett. Like, this cornerback class is actually, like, pretty good. I think it's being slept on a little bit, but you got a number of options. I always go Delane at 11, so I'm going to mix it up a little bit here, going a couple picks earlier. Bengals at 10. Another team that really doesn't take safety very high in the draft, and they just paid one in Brian Cook. But what else do the Bengals do here? I mean, to me, it's going to be Caleb Downs. If the board falls like this for Cincinnati, you've got two options, probably. And maybe Venga Ioane can be option number 3, but I think it's between Downs and the first interior defensive lineman off the board. So do I like Caleb Banks or Peter Woods here? Or do I prefer Caleb Downs as one of the best players in the draft? I think I prefer that. They upgraded their secondary in a huge way this offseason with Cook and Downs. And now with Downs and Ryan, they're cooking. Awful. But Dolphins at 11. What a great opportunity to take the first receiver off the board. I know the Dolphins have a lot of needs, and it's not like they've had a tremendous free agency in terms of fixing all of those needs, but it's not going to happen in one offseason. Tyreek Hill is done in Miami. Receiver is a big concern outside of Jalen Waddle. I like Malik Washington, but you need more. Carnell Tate, I think, is probably the best pick they can make here at 11. And this is already getting to be a weird draft for me. Very unusual to what I typically do because, I've never had Love go at 7. I've never had Carnell Tate go at 11. I've never had Mansour Delane at 9. And I've definitely never gone Dylan Thieneman at 12. But the Cowboys make a move to acquire Rashawn Gary. I think edge is still a need, as is linebacker, as is, corner. But they might not opt to take a cornerback here and instead go with the big-time safety, Dylan Thieneman. He's got exceptional range. He obviously tested very, very well, but that also shows up on tape. He's a sound tackler, and the Cowboys are not afraid to reach on a player they like. And Dylan Thieneman is a very, very good prospect. 12 might seem a bit rich for a safety, but I'm trying to think of who they would actually go with here. Yeah, edge, obviously still in play. I think Fano to play right tackle is also intriguing as well. I think Jermod McCoy, Avion Terrell if they want a corner. But they might just prefer Dylan Thieneman here because he actually played football in 2025, unlike McCoy. And maybe it's a bit early for Avion Terrell with his size, even though I think he's a really, really good player. And they could just wait at 20. There would be a real risk if they like Dylan Thieneman that Thieneman does not make it to their next pick. So he ends up being the pick here at 12. It seems a little early, but I think it just fit here with one of the best players on the board and a huge position of need for the Dallas Cowboys. As we get to the Rams at 13, whether or not they actually make this pick, we'll see. They have no desire to draft anybody, it appears, in the first round. They like trading those picks for players, and they did so with Trent McDuffie, and then they made him the highest paid corner of all time, highest paid defensive back of all time, I believe. So I like that move. I think Trent McDuffie is a hell of a player. I mean, obviously, if you've been following the channel for a while, he's a big draft crush for me, and that obviously worked out pretty well. But he still was a first-round pick. Went outside the top 20, but still. People knew he was good. He was just a top 10 player for me. He might have been a top 5 player. I'll have to go back and check my rankings. But Rams at 13, Kenyon Sadiq is intriguing. Because, I know they have a ton of tight ends. Colby Parkinson, Tyler Higbee, Terrence Ferguson, Davis Allen. But Sadiq, it really doesn't have to play tight end. He can be a big power slot and give you a real mismatch. I think they like that with Terrence Ferguson. So Mekhi Lemon, to me, makes a little bit more sense here at receiver. Play him in the slot. He can also play on the outside. And now you have a receiving core that features, for at least a couple more years, Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, and now Mekhi Lemon to work in the slot and then occasionally on the outside. I think he's really, really good after the catch. He's a good route runner, and he's really strong at the catch point. Feels like a Rams type of receiver to me. As we get to the Raiders at 14, it's like, what are they going to do? Take a corner? They've traded for the Chiefs corners and signed the Chiefs corners. So I don't know the corner is necessarily a huge need for them anymore, especially not at 13. It's something you could consider down the board. It's something you could still draft at 13. There's no question. But Lemon, to me, to take the second receiver off the board, seemed to make a little bit more sense. And I've liked this fit anyway. As we get to the Raiders at 14, first time with them being on the clock, courtesy of the Maxx Crosby trade. The NFL has changed so much since we were last here for a mock draft. And for the Raiders, I feel like the right selection is Spencer Fano. They've spent a lot of money in free agency, especially on defense, but also on offense. I mean, the Linderbaum contract is insane, and I'm not saying he's not worth that, and I think they had so much money to spend anyway. I like the Linderbaum deal a lot. I know he's getting paid $27 million per year. It's a fairly short-term deal for one of the best, if not the best, center in the NFL. You can talk about Creed Humphrey, respect it, but obviously Linderbaum is, if he's not one, he's two. And it's a newer contract, salary cap goes up, and the Raiders needed to meet the salary floor. I have no problem with them spending money to get Tyler Linderbaum, especially if you're going to draft Mendoza at 1. It's not really a bad idea to pair him with a really good center. And now you bring in Spencer Fano, who is just one of the best offensive linemen in the draft. Yes, his power is questionable, and now the arm length at the combine, questionable. I want a remeasurement at the pro day. I'm still convinced that he can play right tackle, which is what he would be doing here. I think it is an upgrade over DJ Glaze. I think Charles Grant is still someone that needs a lot of development. So Fano here makes a ton of sense. And if you like him at right tackle, I think keep him at right tackle. That's what he did at Utah. But there's also a chance with injury he could come in and play guard, center even. But this is a really, really good player. And it's a commitment to building the offense first, which I think is the way to do it with a young quarterback. It's got to be. I know the defense still needs some work, and they spent a lot of money in free agency trying to help that defense. But in order to make your quarterback as successful as possible, you've got to make the environment around him as good as possible. And defense at 14, while a strong option, does not help make Fernando Mendoza's life easier. And we'll still see if they go with a vet bridge quarterback before turning it over to him or not. But even if you do, make the offense as good as possible. Building the best offensive line you can is a great start. Bucks at 15. They bring back Cade Otton. Kenyon Sadiq, still an option, in my opinion, but maybe not the strongest option. I'm going to go with Akeem Mesidor. Ready-made pass rusher from day one. He'll be a 25-year-old rookie. I don't think Todd Bowles would care about that a tremendous amount. Yes, Jason Light's still going to be around probably regardless of what happens with Todd Bowles, so maybe it's a pick for the future here. But if you want to make this team as successful as possible, you've got to improve the pass rush, and Mesidor does that right away. Older prospect, not amazing against the run, injury history, but an awesome pass rusher. And what can the Bucks really do at 15 to find this level of pass rush? Cassius Howell is an interesting prospect, but has his own problems with the short arms and the way that he wins, which is instantly or not at all. And I'm not sure that's going to be instantly very often in the NFL. So maybe he doesn't end up being a top 15 pick. But Mesidor's way of pass rushing should translate. He's a bigger edge. Power really not much of his game, though. He's really a finesse rusher at 270, 280 pounds. Really intriguing player. And I think a good fit here for the Bucks at 15. If he were a bit younger without the injury history, he'd be a higher pick than this. He'd be a top 10 player, but instead goes at 15, which is still like pretty high in the draft. As we get to the Jets at 16, they are probably not going to bring back Elijah Vera Tucker. They may, and by the time this video comes out, he may be a Jet. They lose John Simpson. Who's playing guard for this team? How about the best one in the draft? Venga Ioane from Penn State. Plug and play starter. Replacement for John Simpson. Guard would still be a need, and so is receiver. But I like what they've done in free agency so far, but I want to keep the strength a strength. And you don't want this offensive line to get much worse. I love their tackles of the future. I think Joe Tippmann's a really solid option at center. But who's playing guard for this team right now? I think Ioane is one of the best players here in the draft and a very good option for the Jets at 16. Lions at 17. Going to go with Keldrick Falk. I think Falk is being a little bit underrated and disrespected as a prospect. Some are saying he's like not even a draftable player, which is absolutely ridiculous, and they tell on themselves pretty instantly with that. His floor as a run defender makes him a pretty valuable prospect in and of itself. Like, he offers you a solid starter purely based on his ability to defend the run. He's great at shooting into the backfield, making plays. He can set the edge. He's got great size, length, and he's a really good athlete for that size. He's not going to look as bendy as a 240, 250-pound 3-4 outside linebacker. That's not who he is. He's a 275, 280-pound rugged defensive end that offers you surprising quickness. And this is a guy who apparently can't rush the quarterback. We care so much about production. He had 7 sacks in 2024, playing as a 19-year-old in the SEC. Or an 18-year-old, 18, 19-year-old. He'll be a 20-year-old rookie. And I think this is the type of edge rusher the Lions like. And they bring in Cade Mays in free agency. I like that a lot. Left tackle's a need. Don't get me wrong. You lose Taylor Decker. So is Caden Proctor a strong option here? Yes. Is Caleb Lomu? Maybe. But I think Falk here is a good option as well. And you look at their edge rush, Falk has a ton of potential. I think the Lions are playing for potential and the ability to win now. I think Falk really helps you do both. Great against the run and can offer you a little bit of pass rush, hopefully, as he develops as a player. Vikings at 18. Jermod McCoy's here. I'm going with Avion Terrell. I think some teams may end up being scared away from Jermod McCoy. We haven't seen him play football in a while. 2024, end of the year, or I think it's spring game maybe. Torn ACL, out for all of 2025. Apparently was about ready to come back, and he and Tennessee decided it was not the best move. They were not going to make a college football playoff run, and then he doesn't work out at the combine. I don't know that he's a surefire top 10 or 15 pick. He's my favorite corner in the draft, but I don't know where he's going to go. Avion Terrell is a dog, and it feels like a great fit in Minnesota. You look at who the defensive coordinator is. You know how he loves to blitz. Avion Terrell, I think, can do that for you, and he can also play boundary corner. He's a fumble forcing machine. He's a dog. He can stay in phase. He's a little bit undersized, but that's the only thing that prevents him from being a top 10 pick. Really, really good player. Minnesota obviously needs to improve their secondary. I think Avion Terrell is a great start. Panthers at 19. Running the card for Kenyon Sadiq. One of my favorite players in the draft. He's a super athlete, mismatch at tight end. Maybe not going to be an inline player so much as he's going to be your power slot, really ultimately a receiver. But that's still really valuable. I think with the injuries of Jatavion Sanders and Tommy Tremble is underwhelmed, Kenyon Sadiq becomes a strong option at 19. Really good player. At number 20, Cowboys back on the board and went with safety Dylan Thieneman at 12. Jermod McCoy, strong option here at 20, but I think CJ Allen's going to be a player that really intrigues this team because he's a green dot player. He called the defenses at Georgia, called, every type of adjustment they were going to make supposedly. And to have that level of intelligence as a college player, but also having the leadership skills that he's reported to have, the athleticism, the ability to defend the run, and he's not awful in coverage. This is a valuable player in a league that seems to be valuing linebacker more and more as teams run more too high and then teams counter with running the ball more against too high. Linebacker shooting back up in value in terms of what we're seeing not only in the draft but free agency. It's expensive to have a good linebacker now. So CJ Allen, if you can get him at 20, I think ends up solving one of the Cowboys' biggest needs, which is obviously their Mike linebacker spot. I love the addition of DeMarvion Overshown post-injury. And I hate the Cowboys, but hook 'em horns, DeMarvion Overshown, the Sweat Bandit. I think this would be a really good pick for the Cowboys. At number 21, I do it every time, but I still think receiver is going to be heavily in play here for the Steelers at 21. Tyson keeps falling here, and I don't know why the Steelers would let him go by. He's such a good player when healthy. The health concerns are legitimate. It's a lot of things. Broken collarbone, torn ACL, nagging hamstring injury. He's missed a lot of time over his college career, but when he's on the field, he is an electric playmaker who is tough, gritty, great after the catch, strong at the catch point as well, and has the size that Mekhi Lemon does not offer. I really like Jordan Tyson as a player. I think guard is a huge need for Pittsburgh. Huge need. But there just wasn't the right one to take here. I don't think cornerback is heavily in play with bringing in Jamel Dean. Of course, you have Joey Porter Jr. You re-sign Asante Samuel Jr. Corner is still going to get drafted here by the Steelers, I would imagine, but maybe not at 21 with a guy like Jordan Tyson available. Chargers at 22. Man, the more I see the Chargers moves, the more I feel like this is going to end up being an edge rusher. Khalil Mack back on a short-term deal. I love him as a player. You have Tuli Tuipulotu, but edge, I think, is going to be strongly in consideration. Odafe Owe signs a monster deal to go to the Commanders. And I think TJ Parker's starting to get a little bit more hype. He's had such a great offseason. He tested well. He did great at the Senior Bowl. The 2025 tape is not amazing. And he was a really good player in 2024. I thought he could be the top, one of the top players taken in the draft going into the year. I thought he'd be a top 5 or top 10 pick. He falls to 22 here. And I think this is a good pickup for the Chargers. Trying to improve this defense, trying to get younger. I think Parker is a good way to do that. Can be a rotational player, early, and then end up being a starter post Khalil Mack. And I think the value is here at 22 in order to make that happen. At 23, going to go Jermod McCoy to the Eagles. I think corner is a pretty big need for them, and Jermod McCoy is one of the best players in the draft. He falls due to injury. I don't think that's really stopped the Eagles before. If a player falls into their lap, they make it happen. Sometimes trading up a couple of spots to make it happen, but the Eagles have been so good lately because they draft good players, and then they develop those players, of course. McCoy's a stud, and I think it'd be a really tough player to pass on at 23 if he were to fall, and the Eagles grab him. Browns back on the clock. Went with Monroe Freeling at 6, and receiver is still a need, and Omar Cooper is available. I think Omar Cooper is going to be heavily in play at 14. Reunite him with Fernando Mendoza. But he falls to 24 in this scenario. The Browns really need receiver. Cooper's a stud. He's really great after the catch. He's an explosive player and has been productive, was a star receiver really for Indiana and a big reason why they were so good on offense. He's going to end up going in the first round, maybe top 20, maybe higher than this. But 24 is a good spot for him. There's some that think he's going to end up being the second or third receiver off the board. For me, he's the fourth right now. But I like the pick for Cleveland. Chicago, they've been active. They signed Devin Bush. They cut Tremaine Edmonds, who's now, of course, a Giant. And they lose Dominic Robinson. Edge is a need. Interior D-line is certainly a need. But I think the interior D-line is their biggest need. They bring in Neville Gallimore. I understand that, but they still need more. And I think Caleb Banks is a really, really good fit here. He's 6'6", 330 pounds with super long arms. He's a great athlete. His best plays, he looks like one of the best players in this draft. A little bit inconsistent, was banged up in 2025. So you're really looking at 2024 for the big picture. Only played in a few games in 2025. Crushed it at the Senior Bowl. I think he's a good player. I think he could go a lot higher than this. I really think his ceiling is the Bengals at 10. That's as high as he could go, in my opinion. Maybe the Saints at 8 if there are a lot of defensive linemen off the board early and that's the direction the Saints want to go. And maybe the Chiefs, right? But probably the Bengals at 10. And he could also fall out of the first round. Like, defensive tackle is one of the weirdest positions in this draft because there are guys that have potential, but they all have their downfalls. McDonald, what's the pass rush going to be? Peter Woods, 2025 wasn't very good. He's an explosive athlete. He wasn't really a finisher in 2025, even though he was a great freshman and sophomore player, just wasn't there as a junior. And then he declares for the draft. Where's he going to go? Lee Hunter, what's the pass rush really going to be? So it's hard to get an interior defensive lineman off the board real early. They could fall. And at 25, if they fall, I think the Bears should probably look to take one. And I think, Banks is a really intriguing option, as is Peter Woods. It's just tough to know how many interior defensive linemen are going to go high in this draft. But Banks offers you some pass rush, and he's a great run stopper, or at least is shown to be at times. It's a good option for Chicago as we get to the Bills at 26. They haven't been very active in free agency because they have no money. So what are they supposed to do? They bring in DJ Moore. That helps at receiver. It really does. But that edge rush needs to improve, and I think Cassius Howell is just the type of player that they'd be looking for. Undersized, short arms, but explosive off the edge, and is a good speed rush option here at the end of the first round. Niners at 27. I don't know what's going on with Trent Williams. He may not end up being a 49er again, but as I'm recording this, a lot's happening, so he could end up being back already. But Caden Proctor is an option. Could come in and start at left tackle sooner rather than later. He's larger than life, maybe a bit of a project, but has played well and has played very badly at times. If you can develop him, you're going to have a very good player. The athletic tools are just so great, and the size is so unbelievable. He's a really, really intriguing player that I think in a lot of classes could go a lot higher than this. But he just hasn't quite put it all together yet. And that's why he falls to the end of the first round, but still has starter potential and really good starter potential because he has tools that you just can't teach. As we get to the Texans at 28. Man, I had Chase Basantis here, but I think I'm going to switch to Peter Woods. I don't know if there are going to be more guards that go in round one. I like Emmanuel Pregnon. I like Chase Basantis. It just seems like they might end up being more in the day two range, early day two. Peter Woods is a really strong option. I know the Texans went out and they improved their interior defensive line by not losing players, bringing back guys like Sheldon Rankins, but Woods is young with high upside and worth taking a shot on here at 28. I know you need offensive line help. I totally get that. You look at their picks, 38, 59, 69. That's going to be the sweet spot for guard and center in this draft. And they could even take, one of these early day 4 picks like 106 and package that together to move up from 38 to 34 or something like that. If they really think they need to move up for a Basantis or a Pregnon, they may end up with both at 38 and 59. If you want, more help at center, and I understand what the Texans have done in free agency. You bring back Ed Ingram. You don't necessarily need, another guard outside of Pregnon or Basantis if you get either one of those guys. But Connor Lew could be your center of the future. Keelan Rutledge, I was really impressed by at the Combine with the way he moved. Jake Slaughter, starting center potential. Billy Schrouth, I like quite a bit. I love Logan Jones. I think he's a future starting center who's not going to go until probably, day 3. You've got some options. Peter Woods, you're likely not going to be able to find his level of talent down the board. And I think joining this defense, you may be able to unlock that full potential. Chiefs at 29 for the first time in one of my mock drafts. How about Denzel Boston? Receiver is still a big need, and Boston is the big-bodied receiver that they don't really have. Rashee Rice, I can't rely on. I don't know what I'm going to get if I'm the Chiefs. Xavier Worthy, a ton of speed, has not been able to unlock his full potential as a player yet, but Boston offers you something you don't have in that receiver room right now, which is size and jump ball contested catch ability. Could be an intriguing option for Kansas City here with their newfound first-round pick. Broncos at 30. People have been disappointed by the Broncos' free agency so far, but you were able to bring back Sternad. You were able to bring back Alex Singleton, able to bring back Troutman. I know these are not world beaters. You cut Dre Greenlaw. Linebacker still potentially a position of need. You lose John Franklin Myers. You don't love that. If Peter Woods got here at 30, that may be a strong option for Denver. But receiver to me is just still something they need to address. And Casey Concepcion, they brought in for, a meeting at the Combine. Surely some level of interest there with his ability to win down the field and how good he is after the catch. I think he offers you something that the Broncos don't really have right now. I get, some people like Troy Franklin to win deep down the field. Concepcion, I think, is a more consistent player. The hands are a little bit inconsistent, but his ability to get open, I think, is significantly better. He can beat press. He can win in the slot. He can return kicks for you. He's great after the catch. He's a fun player. As we get to the Patriots at 31. Going to go Blake Miller here. I think he's got a chance to start at right tackle. You look at this Patriots team, the offensive line needs some help. I think Jared Wilson will ultimately move over to center. You trade Garrett Bradbury, I think, for that reason. But Blake Miller's got a chance to come in and start at right tackle. I think that's what's going to end up happening. You have some other options there. Whether or not Morgan Moses is on the team in 2026, we'll see. But not positive on that one. Miller's got a chance to come in and start. I think he does probably end up going in the first round, maybe even earlier than this. I think Will Campbell, they want to stick at left tackle. So guard will be a position of need, but it's not going to be one that they're going to address here at 31 in this mock draft. As we get to the last pick of the first round, it's Seattle at 32. They lose probably Reek Woolen by the time this video comes out, or I think that will be happening. They bring back Josh Jobe on a really team-friendly deal, in my opinion. You lose Kobe Bryant. Corner is a need. Safety's a need. And Emmanuel McNeil-Warren's just hanging out. Keep Julian Love at strong safety. You bring back Ty Okada. I like that. But how about a rangy safety that can hit and that can make plays on the ball? That's Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. I think it's a really good fit for the Seattle defense. I think Mike McDonald's going to be able to find ways to creatively use him as well. But he's got size. He's got range. He's got playmaking ability. He forces fumbles. He makes plays on the ball with pass deflections, interceptions. He's a good defensive back. And that is one of the weirder mock drafts I've done. But trying to get used to things that have happened today. And maybe next Monday's mock draft is going to look a lot different than this. But this is what we're going with today. Some things stayed pretty similar. Some things changed a lot. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.